What we love about these sessions is that they're very much around open collaboration. So this is your 45 minutes to sort of leave all your woes behind, just literally have the opportunity to listen, participate, and share your ideas, your thoughts, your experiences as part of this session. We've got some great guests that have joined us as well with worldly experience in the world that we'll be talking about today. Thank you everybody for joining, and others will be joining us throughout this session. So just to kick off proceedings, my name's Paul Higgins. I'm basically your host today. So if you've got any complaints, put them towards Jan. Any complimentary thoughts, please contact me on LinkedIn. But today, my responsibility to supporting yourself, I focus very much around growth, innovation, for training providers, looking at very much around qualifications and training and the whole impact measure that we will sort of talk about for our sort of transition in this session today as well. So just to make sure everybody's in the right session today, the actual title is very much designing and creating future-proof training. If you've got any questions, please use the chat facility that is enabled. We will do the best then to interrupt our guests with your great questions, and perhaps might ask you to bring them to life. But all I can say is today is your opportunity, 45 minutes, open collaboration, share your thoughts, your ideas, your aspirations, and hopefully we can help and answer that from that point of view. So objective one, though, is just to perhaps listen, learn something that you didn't know before you started this session. If you can apply it tomorrow, brilliant. But that is the goal of this webinar today. So thank you, Jan, for being the sponsor of this monthly series of the business of training. And Jan, perhaps I could ask you to introduce yourself as the sponsor and perhaps a little bit more insight to the world of Inmisceo and yourself, please.
Thank you, Paul. Of course, I'd be honored to do so. I'm going to famously share my screen. This is always the exciting moment of will that actually work?
Well,
Paul, is it working?
It is indeed. As everyone knows, Jan is not very good with time management, so we will keep an eye on his time on this. But Jan, please take it away.
I have 45 minutes, right? Because I only have 150 slides, so it's really quick.
Okay, as long as it's impactful and it's meaningful.
Okay, all right, I'll drive impact then. All right, quick introduction to Inmisceo. Inmisceo means blended and mixed. Blended learning is what we do a lot of. And mixed, we have a very mixed team, all kinds of different backgrounds. So we're very proud of that. With regards to what we do, let's have a look. As our vision is, we like to advance people one learner at a time, so very personalized. What we do, our mission, we help training providers improve their training impact with technology, content, consultancy. And our customers are training providers. Sometimes they're also associations, because associations are also training providers. So that's training companies is mostly who we work with. What are our principles? Well, we really believe that training is a people business. We're training people, and we use technology to scale for consistency, personalization, and to add some learning science. What is the impact that we have made ourselves as Inmisceo? Well, we've enabled over time, since we started, 2018, we've enabled just over 1.5 million learners. The training companies, the trainers that we've been working with, they added about £14 million to their revenue streams. And several of them have been winning awards, and quite prestigious awards as well. So quite proud of that impact, but we're just at the beginning. We want to scale that up. Now, how do we do this? Well, we help training providers with designing, creating, delivering the most impactful blended and online learning. And we use aNewSpring for that. aNewSpring, we are the strategic partner of that. Roy will tell you more about aNewSpring and who you see here, because Roy is also with aNewSpring. Thank you for waving. And we also enable training companies to measure and prove what impact they make. We have our software for that, which is called Inmisceo SIP. And if you know the Kirkpatrick learning model, 4 levels, then that's how we enable that. If you want to know more, Google Inmisceo SIP and you'll find out more. The other thing that we really like doing is we like to have some science behind it, but also a method. So we have the Inmisceo method, where we help you training companies to plan, build, grow, scale the impact that you're making. And we also like to share what we learn. We share that with the training provider community. We do this with webinars like the one you are on now. Every month there's this webinar, different topics every time. But what you see on your screen doesn't look like a webinar. We also do a conference. The conference is in October. It will be the third time that we organize this. This is the Royal Horse Guards Hotel in Whitehall, central London. And this is where it takes place again. 23 October. Here you see some of the speakers. And that's definitely going to be an exquisite event again. Ask a lot of people in the room, they've been there. Business of Training Conference. Google the Business of Training Conference 2025 and you'll find more information. Thank you, Paul. Am I within time?
It wasn't bad. I mean, there's always room for improvement, I think is always the phrase that I like to use with yourself. But no, thank you so much for that. And I did like the picture of last year's conference. I did see Roy and myself in that picture of Who's Who. So that was brilliant. Thank you very much for that insight. Obviously, you alluded to one of our special guests today, Roy. Roy, could I perhaps ask you to perhaps give yourself a bit of an introduction, if you don't mind, please, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Jan, for sponsoring this webinar. I am Roy de Vries. I work at aNewSpring as our learning innovator, which means that I get to inspire our audience and our community with insights when it comes to improving your training and helping people learn. I do that via events that we're organizing, our Love to Learn experiences, our Love to Learn letter, but also through sort of consultancy and hosting and organizing workshops with our customers to make sure that they know more about the learning science, about everything they can do to create even more impact with their learners in short. And I'm very much looking forward to the upcoming conversation. I already saw some topics when it comes to transfer and adaptive learning. So I'll hold my horses for now, but I'm happy to join in.
Thank you, Roy, for that. And yeah, and I think you pretty, one of the best titles out there as well is your role. So well done on that one. And obviously to balance that up as well, I'm very pleased to introduce John to the fold here today. John, would you take the opportunity just to perhaps give a little insight who John is and your business, which is quite aptly named. I'll let you explore that and share that with others.
Thank you for that, Paul. I'm delighted to be here and take part in today's conversation. So my name is John Stuart. I'm founder of Blend Training, and thank you. Perfect timing for my LinkedIn post if anybody wants to connect. Always keen to grow the network. Blend Training, we do exactly what it says in the tin. We look at blended training solutions for a range of different clients. We do have some specialist knowledge where we work predominantly within technology environments, working with system providers and a whole range of clients, those system providers, to ensure that they get the most out of their technology. And the way we do that is we combine our training approaches with whatever their business processes and actual business needs are. So I'm looking forward to chipping in today, I guess, with some experiences from a practical perspective, how we've helped support clients use some of the technologies that are out there to get impact with their learners, with their operational teams, and equally to learn a bit from everybody in the call today as to their experiences and challenges in there to see if we can share some common problems. But yeah, looking forward to that. Thanks, Paul.
John, thank you so much for that. And I think also, we talk about challenges, and I think what's been nice is actually the four of us actually have been involved in a similar challenge and actually helping our clients out as well. Because we talk about impact, and John alluded to about collaboration. and sometimes, you can't solve everything, but in collaboration you can, and it can be very, very powerful. And I know that the work that John's been doing and with Inmisceo and Jan as well, when we talk about impact, the one particular organization, when we looked at the impact they've done for their own customers and clients, I think they were generated, was it like over 38 billion of social value? Now, we don't claim that the training achieve that, but what we know is obviously an integral part of that company's success about having effective, meaningful, and relevant training to help them on that journey as well. So it's great that we've all come together to knit that together today. But I think equally today is as I talked about, an open collaboration for everybody to share ideas, thoughts, and insight as well. So really, if it's okay, for to kick it off in some respects, so I could just perhaps pose a question. And John, as I can see your presence directly in front of me, I was just thinking about some key strategies for maximizing learning transform, from training programs that you've perhaps been involved with. Just wonder if there's any insight that you can give, because I think, as I talked about, all I want today is to give some insights, some those golden nuggets of information that people can perhaps digest and perhaps take away with them. But when you're looking at it from a strategy point of view and learning transfer, could you perhaps give an insight of some of your experiences along that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the starting point for thinking about how to have effective learning transfer, how you work with an organization to do that, um, goes right back to the beginning of the training need cycle. I think that if you are fortunate as training providers, we're not necessarily always in the position where we do the full life cycle, but if you're fortunate enough to be able to get engaged early and get involved in training needs analysis, the the construction of that process that will flow from the training needs analysis allows you so many mechanisms to improve the overall impact of a training project, right the way through to how you're going to measure the impact of that at the end, or as you go through it. And if you get involved at the start, that means you can actually build in some of the, I guess, the measurement tools that will have that impact. I get this is probably at the forefront of my mind because you were just mentioning I guess our shared client that we've worked with. We did a piece of consultancy with them while they were still a relatively small organization. They had some big aspirations and great vision, and because we worked with them from the very beginning, we built a training needs analysis that matched their strategic vision, which means that can evolve and change their training needs over time. Built a training academy. It's hosted on aNewSpring, went out to their existing clients as they started. That is now starting to significantly change shape and grow and scale. And we're now into the second iteration of content as it evolves along with the organization and the strategic needs. I think the key for the success of that now 5-year relationship, that all kicked off with a request for we need some help identifying what our learners look like, what they might need, who they might be, and it started with really simple basic questions. However, I say simple, it's not necessarily simple because when you get into the learning needs, the answer might be difficult. But being involved from the very beginning has a huge impact from that. And if you can then apply all of that experience and knowledge throughout the training lifecycle, you can have a really big impact, particularly linking that into how you're going to measure it, how you're going to track the success, because that also gives you the ability to react and respond so you can have an iterative component to your training plan.
Yeah.
You can learn from mistakes. You can learn from learner feedback. You can look at what's been tricky, where the challenges are, and you can continually evolve that. So there's a host of things. That would be my sort of key takeaway. I think is the start, the training needs analysis, scoping that carefully and in a level of detail you can act on it.
Yeah. John, some of the points you were just talking about obviously resonated with me as well. But we talked about the impact element to it, and sometimes at the beginning of the program, that's quite hard sometimes to actually for them to encapsulate in some respects, because we know that we can talk about impact after the event and say yes, that was our objectives. However, really at the beginning of the project, sometimes it's quite hard for them to set the seed, why are we doing this? Well, we have a business pain type of thing, but when you break it down a little bit more granular to really look at what is that impact, I find sometimes that's quite a challenge sometimes, but it's so important at the beginning of the project really to set that up, because that then follows throughout the actual training in some respects, or the learning experiences. Would you say that's true? Because it is our role. Do you know what is, we talk about the content as content strategy, but it's sometimes actually at the beginning is about the business value as well. What they
Yeah.
see that, and is that the same shared value across the different departments, should we say, in organizations?
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely. I think that's very pertinent. It is a challenge. There's a big emphasis on how you can articulate that with clients. I think as training providers, we wear a lot of different hats throughout
Mhm.
the training life cycle. And what you're sort of picking up on there is I would describe that as being much more on the consultative skills component. It's the how do you engage and understand a client's needs and wants,
Mhm.
and particularly how do you articulate it in a way that is meaningful for them?
Mhm.
Because you're having to describe something that they don't know they need sometimes, or they have a feeling that they need it, or somebody's told them they need it, but they don't really understand what it is. And that's about how do you take them along in that journey? How do you give them that knowledge, educate them as you go along there, but also, and I think this can be hugely important, how do you describe that in a way that's meaningful? So how do you capture their imagination? There's a lot of chat over the last few years about the storytelling component of what we do, but how do you capture that imagination and tell it in a way that they will understand? And then you can elaborate and grow that and build on that so that as they go along their path, you can help them. You can give them a bit of direction, give them some detailed information when they need it, but also equip them enough to be able to properly formalize their own vision. How do we get to where we feel we need to be?
Yeah.
And you need them to do that. The reality is you can only advise. But there is an emphasis on us to do that. I think that's a challenge for training provision
Yep.
because often we have a lot of very, very good technical experts. You have, like great trainers that know the specific topics that they're training on, great content developers that can build amazing interactive materials. But being able to sit with a client and deal with what for them is often all of the grey areas around what they want. That consultation skill is tricky, and I think there's an emphasis on us to, make sure that we've got the skills as an industry to be able to deliver into that and to provide real value to clients.
Yeah. No, John, no, thanks for that, just that little bit of an insight. I know we'll build on that as we go through this discussion today. Perhaps at that point, Roy, could I perhaps bring you in as well? Obviously, just on the same sort of theme, really, around the learning transfer from training programs. What's your take on that, Roy?
Well, I love the business and collaborating aspect. And one of the things, looking from a learning science perspective, is that the involvement of the managers and of the people in the organization should really be aligned with the training. And what I mean with that, one of the models when it comes to transfer is the 12 levers of transfer.
Mhm.
Melanie Martinelli from the Transfer Effectiveness Institute will be speaking at the Business of Training conference this year, so highly recommended to watch her. But the 12 levers are levers you can work with in the design of your training, but also in the organization and in the motivation of the learners to make sure that transfer is going to happen. And one of the things that stood out to me was the involvement of peers and the involvement of managers. And I think that's often overlooked. It's often still seen as an individual, especially when we look at online learning, for example, as an individual thing that people just do by themselves in their own time. But I think that incorporating managers into the whole process is really helping learners to at least get the knowledge and the skills back to the workplace. So
Mm.
one of the things that I really like, very practical one, is to, for example, create a playbook for managers. All right, so I'm teaching one of your staff. This is the training they're going through. I recommend you before the training to ask them these and these questions. 2 weeks after, sit down with them, ask what they learned from the training and how they applied it in their training. And then maybe 3 weeks later, have another discussion, or maybe even a team discussion. Just offer managers the guidance, very low effort, to help them create awareness with their staff, but also with themselves on what it means to really implement what they've learned into the workplace. So if you ask me about what is one of the key strategies for maximizing learning, I think it's not just focus on the learner, on the content, but also on the organization and the manager that's involved. I think that's
That's really interesting insight. I remember one program that we've done collaboratively as well. Again, having all the tools in place in some respects, but the humanization element to it. I know we talk about it, with the new tools that are so prevalent these days. But one thing that really stood out for it was a leadership program that we looked at, and what they'd done also is they gave him the tools. They gave him the space to do this, but what they actually also put in there was a buddying system, similar to what you were talking about with the parent relationship with my line manager, and so I can talk about it, I can reflect on that. So because it's information at one point, and then it transitions to actually something that I can actually is practical that I can apply in my job as well. But also having the opportunity to have a peer-to-peer element into that, they found actually was really instrumental in actually putting through not only the training, but really changing the ethos and the behaviors inside of that organization. And I say, this conversation today is actually just do the simple things well. But it's having the knowledge of what those simple things should be is another real critical thing that I see coming through. So thank you very much, Roy, for that insight. But I suppose that leads on to, from a, how do you do anything like this? But how do you leverage those sort of the tools, the platforms, and everything like that? Roy, I mean, you probably got quite a unique perspective on this with your experiences, with your talks, and obviously the organisation that you represent, obviously for training providers. But if I said to you, about the adoption of tools and the platforms, in that whole world of how do we actually make customizable sort of training programs, where do you start?
I would start with what matters most, and that
Yeah,
is what the learner's job to be done is. So,
yeah.
what do they have to do? What do they have to fix? What social environment are they in? But also, what kind of emotions do they have when they really apply that when they're gonna do that job? Take all these things into account. It's actually sort of a personas, but then persona plus. If you look at the jobs to be done methodology. Uh, but start there. Start with the learner, start what they want to achieve, and not start with what the expert wants to tell.
Hmm.
So I think that's at least the first thing to keep in mind. And then, of course, there's lots of tech you can apply to make sure that you create, I don't know, branching scenarios, personalized feedback, AI-driven suggestions, just to help them get their job done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I suppose making it most more personalised and relevant to that individual in that particular journey as well.
Of
But
course,
yeah,
yeah. And you
yeah,
can
yeah.
only do that if you know what they want to achieve.
Yeah, and also, because we also talk about mastery, don't we, as well, in certain levels, and how do you do that in a world that's very busy these days? But I think we're busy doing the wrong things, and I think
Hmm.
that's quite always an interesting thing. We just haven't got time for it.
Yeah.
But really, it's exploring those value adds that actually do deliver such impact. But it's
Hmm.
how do you reinforce that learning? I find that when I
Yeah.
talk to many organisations, it's yeah, what we've done and it's just been a tick box exercise. No, what we're talking about is something different here. It's a real unique opportunity to actually impact the individual, develop the development, the division that they're actually operating, but also then look at the overall objectives of the business.
Yeah.
And that's when I see that all the things we talk about then really start to really hone in on the behavioral change that I see, with the opportunity to provide that impactful sort of experiences that we see. So yeah, I mean,
To add on that, one of the best use cases I've been working on the last couple of years is an adaptive learning path for medical mathematics.
mhm,
So they're nurses who have to every 2 years train themselves on medical mathematics. It's a very important skill to have, but it's also a very diverse group. So it's people who know a lot about it. It's people who know little about medical mathematics. And if you create this one size fits all training, then the people who don't know a lot will maybe not have enough time to practice, whereas people who already know a lot will be bored and not focus enough. So we put this adaptive engine on that training to make sure that every nurse got content and questions relevant to what they already knew, to their experience, to make sure that for some it only took them 10 minutes because they were already quite advanced, and for others it took them 2 hours, but they needed that time to get up to that certain level that we expect from nurses when you talk about medical mathematics. And I think that's something that I see isn't utilized a lot, especially these adaptive programs. But I see a lot of value in them to make it personalized and to really get to what do I need to know at this moment, looking at my skills and looking at my experience.
So when you talk about that though, what was the business outcome from that? If you're able to optimize people's time because of their relevant mastery of the skills, what was it you're able to calculate then, like a saving to the organization? Because I know we talk about ROI and we can very easily throw these things at a wall and hope it sticks. But
Yeah.
have you got anything that from that particular exercise you were talking about that ROI? Because I think it's
Yeah.
quite important. Sometimes people don't like to talk about money sometimes in training, but I think if you're looking at a business case, could you give us any insight to that one?
Yeah. So we did a calculation, but before that, I want to mention that next to the money, it's important to realize that nurses don't want to be trained. They don't want to be in the classroom. They want to be next to the bed and they want to nurse people. So we gave them back at least 30% of their time so they could spend that where they want to spend and also where we as a society need them. So that's, of course, one of the biggest wins, that they don't spend a lot of unnecessary time in training, but that they can do what they want to do. But if you then look at the results, so I just mentioned, on average, we measured over about 600 nurses who joined this program. On average, the people in the adaptive learning path saved 33% on time to completion. So I think that we compare the linear path to an adaptive path, the linear path was about 2 hours, 10 minutes, and the adaptive path around 1.5 hours, I think, something like that. And if you take that 33% and you say that in the Netherlands, I'm from the Netherlands, there's about 75,000 nurses. Every nurse has to do this training every 2 years. They have roughly a salary of 60 euros an hour, or they cost 60 euros an hour. If you all take that into account, calculate it, every hospital or all the hospitals together in the Netherlands save about 3 million euros every year if they use this adaptive path instead of a regular one-size-fits-all training. And that's, I think, if you calculate it like that, an amazing win for, everyone, I think.
Yeah. No, thanks for that insight to that little case study, because I think it's always those personal stories that people love to hear about. So thank you very much for that and sharing that. John, sorry, Jan.
I love that statistic, Roy. Actually, part of my background, I used to work for the Royal College of Nursing here in the UK. And you just said 75,000 nurses in the Netherlands. In the UK, there are 436,000 nurses active. So 5.8, I had to use my calculator for this. So medical maths, maybe not my strong point. 5.8 times the amount of nurses in the population. Imagine what the saving is at that point.
Yeah, it's. I presented this case study in Germany as well, and I also calculated with German numbers. Well, I think you would save around 25 to 30 million a year if you use this. But the only thing is, in the Netherlands, we have this obligation of every 2 years training them on this topic. I'm not sure whether that's also the case in the UK or in Germany, but if you take that as a given, then yeah, definitely go up to numbers that are mind-dazzling. Yeah.
And it is an issue here as well, because it's always been a topic. Indeed. Okay.
Yeah.
So much for the healthcare part. Any other?
Well, it's good to do a health check for learning and training as well. So thanks, Roy, for those sort of insights. It's brilliant. John, just similar sort of question to yourself, really, as well, about tools, platforms, and the customized element of training programs. Could you perhaps give us a bit of insight from your perspective? And appreciate that you might not have a case study similar to Roy's, but be really good to hear some practical elements from your perspective there, John.
Yeah, absolutely. No, happy to share. I perhaps don't have quite as an impactful adaptive approach as Roy just described, which is really interesting, actually. I'd be really keen to see, and to understand how those technologies interact with that, at like an operational level. But this is probably not the call for that to drill into detail. But I might follow up, Roy, if that's
It's
okay.
about
We'll
sharing,
follow
isn't
up.
it?
We'll follow up.
Cool. What I was thinking about is we're kind of talking about some of the impacts of programs. We're working with a medical manufacturer at the moment, global organization, very big in scale and turnover, not huge staff numbers,
Mhm.
but impacts of changes within their organization can be significant. And they've got a very traditional approach to training delivery at the moment. So they've got good knowledge in the organization. They have got so many materials, you would not believe it. They got an excellent document management system, but unfortunately, it's crammed full with so many documents. It's difficult to find the real value from, the reference material that might get used once every 5 years. So working with their scientific community in the organization, we've been building some learning pathways based on job roles and using, as you would imagine from a company called Blend Training, using a whole host of blended methods. So using a little bit of training delivery, reasonable amount of e-learning in there, and quite a lot of video content being generated with their teams. But one of the biggest impact areas that we've had within that has been around the translation capability in the organization. So although I guess their core business language is English, which is not unusual for it's an American uh, medical organization, so that's understandable. But they have a lot of their staff are based in non-English speaking countries. And one of the things that we've been doing, which has been incredibly impactful, hugely well received. So you talk about the positive components of engaging people, engaging the managers, as Roy was talking about earlier. But being able to provide training materials translated has had a huge transformative impact in the way that they're looking at their training.
Mhm.
So we've collated a lot of their information, rebuilt it in ways that are much easier to distribute, using their existing infrastructure to distribute it. But we have built in some AI translation to that content so that everybody can get it in their own language.
Mhm.
And that means we've been able to build it once, build it in English as a core, work with their SME teams, but deploy that globally with AI translation. And that has been done compared to what translating a training program used to be, unbelievably simpler. We've had the speed difference is extraordinary, and with a little bit of work, you can validate AI translations, embed it in subtitles and videos. We have done some of the content where we've actually dubbed videos. That's a little bit trickier, working with AI to do that because there's a syncing issue with people talking in AI translations. But nevertheless, we've feel that we've managed to leverage some technologies that have evolved enormously in the last couple of years, but the impact in the training program for very little extra cost has been huge because one of the big issues was that people struggled to interpret often quite complex technical or scientific documents
Mm.
because the whole storage system was in English and they were non-English speakers. So while the business language might be that, it didn't make it any easier for learners, so they had massive challenges. And the impact and their time, which we're just in the process of going through a full measurement of that at the moment. So I'll be really interested to see what the outcome of that will be in the next couple of months. But what we're getting back is people are talking from a training time perspective, not dissimilar numbers to what Roy was saying, like up to 30% decrease in the amount of time being spent training because they can move at a much better pace. And that's fabulous. So I think that using technology to impact an operation, that operational impact, being able to measure it is great for us, but for the organization, that just means they're getting all this time back to concentrate on their quality management processes, their application of the knowledge that we're helping train on. It's been superb.
And I suppose that, John, thanks for that insight as well, because that sort of comes to where I was sort of thinking of where this conversation could go because, I think we've done. Me and Jan, we've done like surveys, with some of these other events type of thing, and I think Jan, you can probably correct me, jump back in here, but I think if we look back a year ago, there was probably 20% of people that were, when we served them, just they talked about, say, like AI as a tool, just weren't using it. And then we saw a massive jump, I think, when we did a next survey that actually that had gone, and basically 53% of people are actually using it every day. But I think it's how do we use it? And the fact is it's a tool. Don't get me wrong. So it's a tool to complement other stuff that we do, and we don't use it at the expense of quality. But it's still got to, for me, when I look at how I engage and how I learn, I still need that human interaction element to it to really absorb it, take it in as well. I just didn't know, from other merging technologies, perhaps you're at the coalface here, John. You're really starting to make a change. Obviously, what you're doing with your business, but when you sort of faced about, well, we need to be more competitive as an organization, we need to give a differential out there as well. What other sort of, well, even with inside the A, because AI is a great little umbrella, but there's so much underneath it. I just wonder if there's any sort of hints and tips you could give us, or name a couple of tools, because if I was sat on a leadership training program a little while ago, and there was a lady on there saying, look, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, and now I've got to go and do a presentation. I said, but have you heard about, I think this was obviously take it in slight context, but just to make it formalize it. I've got to go and do a PowerPoint presentation, yeah, but have you heard of using like other tools that can actually give it the right prompts, can actually generate a very professional looking, you still got to put your tone into it. But I think it was like Gamma, I think was the one that replaced, you put the prompts in it and it gave you out a presentation to that. But obviously from a training and a design perspective, what tools are you looking at? What tools work? Perhaps ones that you would hope would work better didn't. So I think, obviously perhaps not to perhaps give those names out, but I'm really interested to get your insight now to, from where we talked about this like last year, it's completely changed as far as I'm concerned. I was just saying, are you seeing that in the training industry?
Yeah, I mean, our experience is very much that. I think we've spent the last couple of years trying to understand the benefits and the areas of impact from a lot of the tools that are out there. We've
Mm.
used quite a number of them over the last couple of years. We've limited that right back down because I think that we have learned as an organization how best to work with some of the technologies that are currently there. There are a lot of things in the marketplace. A lot of them use the same engines. In actual fact, certainly when you look at the language models, there's not that many. There's a lot of front ends, but there's not a lot at the back end. So we've consolidated a lot of what we do and focus working with things like, and we've got our own internal chat GPT that we work with, which we have built to help interact on our content development. But I think my overall feeling is that I look at things like ChatGPT as a very useful tool. It's almost like having an additional member of staff that's very clever and extremely careless.
Mhm.
So the level of supervision that of anything that comes out from AI has to be extremely carefully applied because the hallucination rate, to use the technical term, the error rates that we experience, if you're looking at an error rate of around 10%, that's actually quite poor performance for a training developer because that's quite a lot of content that's going to be wrong. That
Mhm.
has to be picked up. And when you're looking at complex topics, complex data, complex information, like we're often training on, you can't afford error rates like that.
No.
And the amount of checks and care that needs to be taken with material that's generated through AI is significant. So there is a trade-off for is it worth the risk from a quality perspective
Mhm.
to overly engage? So when
Yeah.
you mentioned they are working with Gamma to produce presentations, we have done that, we've tested that, and we've decided the risk is too high for our client base.
Mhm.
I think you can generate materials extremely quickly, and they'll look reasonably good quite easily.
Yes.
but the accuracy rate and therefore the inherent risk of using it is just too much for us. That doesn't mean that we're against using it. We are using it. There are some areas of the business we found it adds real value to. It can be useful, particularly around building knowledge checks and testing some of the materials.
Mhm.
It provides some interesting, language capabilities. Particularly, we've got some of our team are not native English speakers either, and we encourage the use of that to help the interaction between the different teams. But practically speaking, we're still quite wary.
Yeah.
I think
No,
there's some good information. Use Perplexity to do research. Super helpful. It'll
yeah.
help collate that and also give you links to it. Use Copilot on your SharePoint system to find information. Yeah, it can do it, but it's not very good.
Yeah, yeah.
The reliability's not there. And that gets me back to my earlier. It's an intelligent member of staff, but very careless. So you have to be super careful about where you want to apply it, and that's where we've got to. So we're still exploring it, watching what other people are doing, and I'm really interested
Mm.
to find out how people are using it. Because
Yep.
I think if you get it right, as the example I gave you with the language translations, if you find ways to exploit it that actually adds value to what you're offering, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And the more of that we can find, the better. But I'm not on the bandwagon, which is we should all be switching over to AI quickly because I just don't think it's doing that. It's
No.
predominantly a language model. It's not an actual intelligence,
Yeah, yeah.
and we're going to remember that. It's the how do we interact with language models to get help.
Talking about intelligence, Roy, what's your viewpoint on
Hmm.
this?
Well, I like what I like what John is saying. I do have a bit of a different point of view as well, as in I agree, of course, there's error in there. But what I do like is when I worked as an instructional designer, I worked with subject matter experts. I often ask them, all right, for this specific exercise, this knowledge check, we need 10 questions. Can you please, based on this content, create 10 questions for me? And that always took quite a long time. I had to email them a lot. I had to say, are you already done with these questions? Can I put them into the system? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas now what I can do is say, hey, based on this content, here's 10 questions that might fit the program. Can you review them for me and maybe give some feedback or add some stuff that I've missed? And then they go from a creating viewpoint to more of a evaluating viewpoint, which is in my take usually a bit easier, when you already have something you can look at instead of creating something from scratch. So yes, we have to be careful, but I think you can also really help us, especially with subject matter experts and with already creating a first draft of something, for example. And I'll let you go, Jan, in a second. But one of the tools that I was thinking about, I saw Gamma and ChatGPT and Gemini already. I'm a big fan of Dr. Philippa Hartman. Not sure if you know her, very much into AI and education. And she works together with Gianluca Mara on Epiphany. And Epiphany is sort of your instructional design buddy, which is AI. And they take you through the whole process. But it's a very nice tool because it takes all these different didactical views and learning science into account and really guides you through the whole design process instead of taking it all out of your hands, which also hopefully eliminates the error rate because you'll do it together in co-creation, which I think is very valuable and very powerful.
Like always, we always run out of time on these conversations and everything like that. But Jan, have you got any comments just to add into this, just to give us a balanced view?
So yeah, the last part of the conversation with Roy and John talking about the tools, etc. We have seen from both very small training providers, but also very large training providers. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people per year trained. Both have the same problem. There is a flood of content in the market at the moment, mostly AI created. And you can imagine how this works. I might not be a subject matter expert on a topic. I ask AI to create something. I don't know if it's true or not. I publish it on the web for what, $9.95 or something, a small price. So there's a lot of content coming on the market. And you, as a training provider, we see more and more needs to be able to differentiate yourself. So if you're only in content creation, I think you're in trouble. But if you're in adding value to training, and I believe there is a human element into that, so it's very much necessary, then, and I think most people in this call might agree with that, the human element is one way to differentiate, but also to use some additional services within that, whatever you believe the right services are for you. My message in this call is very much look for differentiators for you in your market and don't just do content provision. Thank you.
Brilliant. And I say, I know we've gone slightly over, and I'm sure there'll be more on questions. The reason, obviously, I provided and shared people's links basically is that you can follow up. I say this is basically about an open, collaborative sort of environment that we're generated here. Doesn't mean to say we got the right answers, or it's no one wants to be told they've got an ugly baby in some respects. But I think for me, it's really sort of sharing some ideas, which people are putting different tools in there, and it is about evaluating it and making sure that they are right for you. We've seen the business cases. When AR VR come onto the market space, it took years for them to really then look at the business cases. I think we actually then started to come into medical with the benefits in some respects. I know the large language model is slightly different in how it's going to impact our daily lives. But for me, just to round up from this perspective, I know I'm going to run us slightly over. John, have you got any one word of wisdom for everybody that's on the call today that you would like to leave them with? Other than
Um,
obviously your contact details so they can follow up with you, of course.
Of course, that would be the whys attached to it. I think the first point that I touched upon about around consultation is focused on our consultation skills, or the way in which we engage from the very beginning. Because I think that's where we find the biggest point of differentiation amongst training providers. If you can understand the whole training needs cycle and add real value to the client, help them, advise them, sometimes correct them, but that's where you build your real expertise.
Yeah. And also use the same language that they use so they actually understand what you're talking about is another thing that I've learned. Roy, one word that you would like to share with everybody on the call? Obviously, John didn't listen to what I said, but he just made it up. But John, that's John. Roy?
Let's not forget who we're all doing this for, using all this tech, and that's for other humans. So keep the focus on that.
Okay, that's brilliant. I'd like to say thank you, everybody, for staying the distance today. From my point of view, it was an opportunity just to share a little bit of an insight. We would like to take this further with further conversations, and I'm sure we can put another thing in the diary to dig deeper into this. Today, we only scratched the surface of what is an amazing opportunity I see for everyone to help and differentiate themselves, make it more personalized, but don't forget the human element of what we're talking about here as well. So at that point, I would love to say thank you, everybody, for your participation in the chat, for our guests, for our sponsor. If you're not able to make the next monthly meeting, then we'd love to meet you all at a very, very special venue for the conference that Jan is actually hosting as well. That's obviously been shared in the chat as well. Because we are humans, we love to meet each other face to face as well as doing these events. So if you're able to join us in London for that event, I'm sure Jan will accommodate you very well. I've been to the last two and they've been brilliant, very insightful, and some really great projects that I wasn't aware of unless I was in that room and listening to the great talks that was given. And Roy, I would include you in that as well. You had some gems last year, so I'm looking forward to this year. Other than that, thank you so much. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you can take something away from today, and even better if you can apply it tomorrow, then we've all done our job today. Other than that, thank you so much, and hopefully see you next month for our next Business of Training webinar. Thank you, and have an enjoyable remainder of the week. Bye now.